here. I'm Agile coach and Scrum Master, and just as I said before, a fun kind of person, which I should tell myself not to actually repeat. And Ines is my co-host with us tonight. So Ines, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hola, everybody. Yes, I'm Ines Garcia. What am I today? An inventor. I invent stuff all the time. And for a living, what I do, I'm an Agile coach and a Salesforce MVP. So I help companies to become more agile whilst we deliver Salesforce technology. And today I'm your host.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, so today we are here for a Resilience 101, and you will see a lovely new face in the group, Dr. Richard MacKinnon, and we will come on to you in just a second. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Which leads me again to thank you guys for coming, spending your time with us. It's so precious nowadays, especially in the evening. So it's really, really great to see you here today. As you know, we are, like I was saying, quite a friendly group. I just want to set the reminder there. We do record the session. Hopefully you guys are used to that already. We record it just so that we can share the knowledge that we learn here with other people around who aren't able to come. So just to give you that note, we are time boxed tonight for around about 90 minutes, give or take. I'll do this mini introduction, and Richard will talk for around about 45 minutes, and then we'll have questions throughout, all the sort of normal type of things, and anything at the end that you want to discuss, relevant things, I guess. And we also like to utilize the chat, as you know, as well. So if you've got things, maybe you don't like to speak out so much, or you do, or whatever it is, just feel comfortable to communicate in whatever way you want. Okay, the classic rock, paper, scissors then. If you haven't done this before, I just want to check with the audience that you know the game rock, paper, scissors. I think it's worldwide. Okay, cool. Yes, thank you, Miriam. Can you show me your best rock? Excellent. Your most lovely piece of paper? Oh, I like that, Amanda. And excellent, like the Queen. And lastly, your scissors, preferably like this, unless you've had a bad day. Yeah, cool. Some beautiful scissors out there. Okay, so as you know, we love to play this little game. Well, I say we, it's mainly me. And the rock is a yes, the paper is a not sure, and the scissors is a no. So the first question goes to who is excited to be here tonight? Excellent, we got all rocks, that's good. And second question is, show me a rock if you prefer the spring, or show me a pair of scissors if you prefer the autumn. Oh, got some, not sure, and some autumn lovers out there, but mainly spring. That's always lovely to do. So we should all be very happy and sparkly tonight then, in the best season. And lastly, do you experience resilience in your day-to-day? Okay, so maybe some clarity around what resilience is, and we've got the perfect person here to do that. Okay then, so before we do that, I will pass over to our lovely Ines to do a quick introduction.
Well, so yeah, we're super happy. I'm super happy to have Dr. Richard MacKinnon with us today. The psychologist and coach and managing director of Work-Life Psych. And actually, you know, we know each other from other things. I'm actually really, really interested on the subject at hand. And I think it's extremely important. And we all have been improving our resilience over the last 12 months, we like it or not. And also, I would like to point everybody to Richard's podcast. This is a lovely, casual, and interesting deep conversation, which I thoroughly enjoy. So, Richard, tell us more about yourself. Take it away. Tell us how would you like to engage with the questions throughout the session, however works for you. Time to shine. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. I hope I can live up to that. I'll do my best. So good evening, everyone. Really nice to see you all. What I'm going to do is walk through a story of resilience. It's one of those words that gets used a lot, like stress, like personality, that can mean different things to different people. So I want to clarify what I mean by resilience and then give you some really simple things that you can do in the coming days to start contributing to your resilience. So two very important messages before I put a single slide up. One, resilience isn't a thing that you have or you don't have. Okay, because sometimes if you go to the bookshelves and you see stories of resilience, it's sort of epic feats of endurance and Olympic athletes. Day-to-day resilience isn't like that at all. We all have it, and it's not a fixed state. You know, it can go up and down. The second main thing I'd really like you to take from this is to choose one or maybe two of the suggestions that I go through and put them into practice, because this starts at the level of habits. And so we can build habits that contribute towards our resilience rather than imagining that we can somehow go, and now I am resilient. We can build it up over time, just doing nice, small, easy things. Questions at any point. Okay, and I'd really like help from Helen and Ines here as well. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat. I'm also going to keep an eye on my slides. I'll keep an eye on the time. Oh, so much to do. But if I'm missing a question in the chat, please draw my attention to it. But just say it out loud if you would like as well. So let's get these slides up. So Resilience 101 is we're going to do a quick review of the concept and give you some practical takeaways. So as that lovely introduction said, I'm a workplace psychologist. And what that means is I help people at work. I help them be their best selves. I help them with their well-being, with their productivity, and to be as effective interpersonally as possible. So all of those skills we can put on top of our technical skills to help us get along and get ahead in the workplace. All of that is huge amounts of self-promotion on screen there, and probably the best photo I could find. So that's the credibility stuff out of the way. But if you want to know more about me, just go to worklifepsych.com and you can find out all about the sort of stuff that we do. I'm going to reference the podcast with some resources for you at the end. And I would say, in addition to questions now, if you want to contact me after, by all means, send me a note on Twitter if you don't want to speak up now, or, as is more likely, if you sleep on it and then go, I wish I'd asked him, by all means, get in touch. So I want to put this in context. Everything that we do happens within a context, and resilience is no different. And it's really, really useful, really helpful to think of ourselves as beings in context, because even you in the context of a shared physical workplace versus you at home versus you socializing, remember when we did that, but they're different contexts and they demand different things of us. This context we've all been going through over the last year has demanded very different things of us, because it's not something that many of us have been able to say we've been through before. One, it's global. Very hard for our heads to get around a global crisis, a truly global crisis. And it did, for those of us based in the UK, just speaking from that experience, seem to happen very quickly with a lot of sudden changes. And not only were those changes very sudden, but they happened in multiple domains of life. And what I mean by that is, if work isn't going so well, we often find stability in our home life, or if home isn't going so well, we might find stability and a source of support in our social network. At the same time, all of these domains of life were impacted, and some of them were kind of removed from us completely. And so some of us began to look for other ways that we could look after ourselves. And the story I want to tell is that some of those ways that we attempt to respond to these challenges are really helpful and really sustainable over the longer term, and some of them are less so. And actually, what we can do to ourselves is actually erode or reduce our own resilience by how we respond to difficult situations. So I want to flag a bunch of really simple and sustainable things that you can do in the coming weeks. Now, one of the things that adds to the stress is the sense of ambiguity. Many of us can dig deep and get through a difficult situation as long as we know it's time limited. if we said, your car is being repaired and you've no car for the next 2 weeks. You might say, that is terrible, but in 2 weeks, I'll get my car back. We don't know when all of this is going to end. So there's a part of our minds is trying to problem solve. Part of our mind is trying to sprinkle what we do with anxiety and threat all the time. And because of that ambiguity, and because it's not one change, but a rolling set of disruptive changes, this is the time, this is the context in which our resilience is really, really important. So rather than doing things automatically in response to challenges, this is the time to think more with intent. What is a good way to respond to this? Maybe it's what I've been doing all along, or maybe now's a good time to think of different ways to respond to these challenges. So that point about responding differently, some of our automatic, our learned responses to challenges, to setbacks, to difficulties, to stuff like pandemics, some of them are helpful, some of them are less so. And I want to give you a crash course in how the mind works in the next couple of minutes, because there's a few different ways that our mind operates that we think, well, that makes sense, but actually it doesn't really help us. I want to move away from good, bad, but more so things that we think and do that are helpful in a context or unhelpful in a context. So the first thing is that we grow up, have developed, and as a species have evolved to try and avoid discomfort. It's what keeps us alive. So our mind is telling us that's a threat, that's danger, stay away from that. Unfortunately, it has broadened into avoiding psychological discomfort as well. And there's a lot of that around us. Psychological discomfort includes any state we don't want to experience. It could be the awkwardness of speaking up at a meetup. It could be the boredom of doing some administrative task at work. It could be the ambiguity after we apply for a job, not knowing if we've got it or not. It could be the anticipation of being embarrassed when we speak up in a meeting. All of that fits in this bucket called discomfort. And our mind senses very loud messages that is to be avoided at all costs. But if you think about anything meaningful you've done that you're very proud of in your life, you could also very quickly think of the discomfort that preceded it. Any exams you've sat, any jobs you've secured, any responsibilities you've picked up, any relationship you've ever been in. There's been a great win, but there's been some discomfort, and it's part of the package. So we kind of need to lean in to a certain amount of discomfort, because as I'll explain, when we get caught up trying to avoid it, that's when we get ourselves into trouble. The other thing that happens when we're under pressure, when we're feeling anxious, when our mind senses a threat, it takes us on a time travel journey. Either we can go to the past or we can go to the future. Now, it's really useful to be able to do those. We can go to the past to draw on our experience. How would I solve a problem like this? I've never seen it before, but I could maybe draw on a similar situation. And we can go to the future. We do it all the time when we plan. And it's useful to think about the future. But the unwanted time travel, going to the past, that sounds like when you're trying to go to sleep and your mind says, this is the time to remind you of when you were 16 and you did that thing in front of those people. You don't want that time travel. Or it takes you to the future and says, next week's meeting is going to be a car crash. And it paints you a very vivid picture of something that hasn't happened yet. So one of the most important things we can do is see those thoughts for what they are. Memories that are happening now, and predictions that haven't even happened yet. And develop that skill. And I'm going to talk about that shortly, to spot the mental time travel and try and be more present in the moment. We can also engage in automatic action. Now, habits are great, but we can also divide our habits into those that are helpful about where we want to get to, and the ones that maybe hold us back or don't represent who we want to be as a person. Some of the times, especially when it involves discomfort, we respond automatically in a way that is all about dealing with the discomfort and is not necessarily about dealing with the problem in front of us. If you ever want to see automatic action in a major city, go to a train station and watch people queuing for a train. Because as soon as there's a queue, they will engage in some automatic action to minimize the discomfort of waiting. And these days, it's probably reaching for their phone. They'll reach for their phone and they'll start scrolling. It's an automatic thing. Is it bad? No, it's not a terrible thing, but it's a snapshot of how we can get used to responding automatically to things, which might not be the way we would really intentionally want to respond to it. We can also get caught up here. Our minds are amazing. Many practitioners that I work with, we describe the mind as a thinking engine. It's constantly working, giving us stuff, giving us thoughts, memories, plans, solutions, reminders. It's great. But at the same time, it can also work like one of those grabby machines that you see at the seaside, and it can just grab us from here and now and pull us into a trap of predicting, of mind reading, of believing our thoughts to be truer than they are. We can get caught in a debate with our own thoughts, and we're trying to convince our mind that something is or isn't true. The problem with thinking traps is it just takes us away from the here and now. It takes us away from the people we want to be with, the task that's in front of us, the meal, the TV show. We get caught up here. There's a great book a few years ago written about this whole topic, and it's about it. The title is Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life. And that's really what this is. It's not to be unthinking, but don't get stuck there thinking about the thinking. Spot the thoughts for what they are, and then emphasize taking helpful action. Something that's a little bit metaphysical, and I won't go into great detail, but when we haven't figured out what's really important to us in life, when we encounter a crisis, it means that it can feel even worse than it actually is. We don't know what to draw upon. What's important to us in life? Well, another way of saying that is our values, what we stand for. So one of the best things we can do is lean into what kind of person do I want to be in this situation? I'm just having a quick look at the chat. Thank you, Helen. So figuring out what matters to you, getting clear on your values, and I'll signpost some resources about that topic at the end, because as a life skill, it's really, really useful. And finally, one of the things that we can do when it's maybe not so helpful is to try and control what's happening around us when it's outside of our control. Now, how many people, let me ask you, show of hands maybe, how many of you in the last year found yourself getting angry in front of the TV or frustrated in front of the TV? Yeah? And these people are possibly on the other side of the world. We've no way to even influence them, but because we can see them in the room, we're like, this is really, So it's important for us when we face a difficulty to quickly figure out what's in my control, what's outside of my control, and then focus on the stuff that's in our control. It's really simple, but it's difficult. It's really difficult because if you get very specific, you'll realize that we don't control a lot. We really don't control a lot. Most of the things in life that we encounter and we interact with, we influence, but we don't control them. Control is pull the lever, something comes out the other side. I control if I eat or not, if the food is in front of me. I control what I wear, but only if I do the laundry. I control how I get to work, but only if the trains are running. Okay, so actually figuring out what you've got control over and leaning into that is a really good way to respond to most challenges. Now, these are all the ways we can trip ourselves up. So I want to give you some useful tools, a more positive message. So resilience is basically how we think about difficulties and what we do in response to difficulties. You know, they could be, my email inbox is overflowing. I've got more Slack notifications than I've ever seen in my life. You know, that's at one end, all the way through to major life events, bereavement, job loss, those huge things that are difficult to deal with. That all requires us to have levels of resilience. Now, when we think about resilience, I want you to think about it at the everyday level. How you get over a canceled meeting or a double booking in your diary or a difficult client conversation or technology letting you down. But it's what we need to do every day. It's not the famous people. It is them, but there's more of us than there are of them, and we can develop our resilience. Importantly, it's not just doing the same thing stubbornly in the same direction. Yes, persistence is important, but flexible persistence. We need to be able to change course once we think, is this helpful? Is this not helpful? So the hard-headed persistence is not always helpful. All of us can develop this. These are skills. What's missing for many people is to know what those skills are, and then to work at them slowly but surely. Now, I made the point that we can detract from our resilience through what we do or don't do. Maybe they're automatic actions, maybe it's mind reading, maybe it's catastrophizing the future, maybe it's trying to control what we can't control. But the things we do out of habit, the habitual, and the things we do with intent, those responses, all of that stuff, we can think of it as coping. Now, the word coping has a bit of a bad rep. If you ask, are you coping? You think, well, I better say yes. But actually, we're coping all the time. It's less about are you doing it or not. It's about how helpful is the coping? Because anything could be coping. If you're brave enough, some of the things that we do when we're faced with a difficulty will be more useful and more sustainable and more healthy than others. And we can simply divide coping into two categories: the things that are emotion focused and the things that are problem focused. Emotion focused, those things help us feel better. Can anyone think of something you might do after a tough day at work that helps you feel better? Any thoughts? Let me open the chat.
Go walk.
Boot camp, go for a walk. Great, because you feel better once you've done them. Take the dog out. Excellent example.
Play with my daughter.
Yep, great example. Because probably if it's a work-related thing, it's completely separate to work. So all of those things serve as a distraction, some activity, so an activity where you've maybe got some influence or control, and it's something completely different to the source of the problem. Problem-focused is where we try and address the problem itself. Now, anything could be problem-focused, but it works if we have influence or control over the source of the problem. And you could see that if we do emotion-focused coping, where there's an obvious solution to be had, we're missing a trick. But if we use problem-focused coping, when there isn't a simple problem to be solved here, we might be banging our heads against the wall. We're trying to do something about a problem that we can't control. So it's not that one is good and one is bad. It's all about context. What is the source of my problem? Is it something that involves a politician on TV? I'll go for a walk. I'll feel better. Is it about my relationship? Well, I could take some action with my relationship here at home, or I could talk to my manager at work. Then it's problem focused. And this takes us a little while to figure out. But when you think about your reactions to difficulties, ask yourself, am I doing this to feel better? Which could be great. Or am I doing this to solve a problem? And if it's the latter, is this a problem that I could solve? So we can put these in a matrix. I mean, I wouldn't be a psychologist if I didn't try and put everything into some kind of matrix for you in a presentation. But we've got our problem focused and our emotion focused, and we've also got things that are more sustainable and healthy and more unsustainable and less healthy. So if we were to think about something that is sustainable, we could keep doing it, and it's problem focused. A good example of that would be simply asking someone for help. I've been overwhelmed by work. I've had this technology let me down. I've had an argument with my colleague. I need help. It's a great, sustainable, problem-focused approach. You may get an answer. You may get a fresh pair of eyes. It's all good. Emotion-focused, we had an exercise earlier. Great example. Anything that involves reflection, meditation, social support, like just talking to a friend. They may not have a solution. It's better if they don't. Just being listened to is really helpful. It helps us feel better. Now, there's loads of things on the sustainable side of things, but all you need to do is ask yourself, could I keep doing this forever and it not have a negative impact on my well-being? It's as simple as that. Now, the bottom of the line, problem-focused and unsustainable, we might try and control something outside of our direct control. We might end up being a bit of a micromanager in the workplace. We need to get more out of our team. We can't control their behavior. We can only influence it, but we lean into the micromanagement to try and get more out. And that's unsustainable. It damages relationships and lowers morale. Now, what do you think is the number one response when I ask an audience, what emotion-focused, unsustainable coping strategies could people use? Thank you, Mary Ellen. Yes, food, alcohol, and other substances. They help us feel good, but with excess, they can add to the problem, be it cake or beer or caffeine. You know, they will not improve the situation if they're the only one we have. Not a Puritan, glass of wine after work, a couple of beers after work. This isn't problematic, but if that's the only tool that we use, we're not going to improve our resilience. And all of those things reduce it over time. I'm going to pause here and just check in if you have any questions or comments at this point. I will take your silence as absolute agreement.
I have one question actually.
Fire away.
Richard, is that earlier on you mentioned how it can be good just to talk to people about your problem and not have necessarily a solution for them. Mm-hmm. I find that quite difficult sometimes when someone tells me about their problem and I'm like, oh, I've got this amazing solution that may not work for you, but I want to tell you anyway. How, have you got any advice or any tips on how to stop yourself or redirect?
Welcome to my world as someone who does a lot of coaching, because that's the last thing you want to do as a coach is tell someone what to do. But you could borrow from the coaching handbook and ask someone, you know, once they've told you everything, the first thing is to acknowledge their feelings about it and let them know that their feelings are legitimate, because all of our emotions are legitimate. If they ask you for your advice, give it. If they don't ask you, ask permission and just say, hey, I've got some thoughts. Are you in the headspace to hear those thoughts? Or maybe I could come back to you tomorrow or drop you an email or something. But for a lot of people, the last thing they want is advice. They haven't come to you for advice if they haven't asked for it. So you can always ask if they're open to hearing your perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Could you use wording like, oh, have you considered?
You could. The more tentative you make it, the more you're saying, hey, this is one of many options, because of course you're viewing their difficulty from your perspective, because that's the only perspective you can have. Maybe they haven't told you everything. Maybe they haven't told you the bit they're ashamed of or embarrassed about. So you're offering some tentative solutions or directions of travel based on what they've said. But yeah, I mean, it comes from a good place, right? But if someone wants to be listened to, the best thing you can do is listen, paraphrase, acknowledge their hurt or frustration or anger. The benefit they get from it is that they've been heard. That's what social support gives us. We don't need solutions to feel better. We just need to feel that someone's actually listened to us. So a top tip for 2021 would be don't multitask while someone is pouring their heart out to you, because they won't feel listened to if you're scrolling or looking at a screen. Give them your full attention for a few minutes, and that makes all the difference. So the way we respond to big challenges, we shouldn't compare ourselves to each other. We shouldn't say, well, they're doing a great job, why can't I? Because there is no one perfect way to respond to things. You may have been presented at training in the past or events as, here is the curve that we go through. There's no such thing that science supports. It's a good metaphor, it's a good visual, but you know what? There might be backwards before there's forwards, and there might be 3 steps forward and 2 steps back on the way to coping with things. Just check in with your own direction of travel. Check in with your own progress. The comparison to other people, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg when we see them. We're not seeing everything else that's going on for them. So just compare yourself to yourself. Today versus yesterday. Am I heading in the right direction? Even if the steps are tiny, am I happy with the direction I'm heading in? And I want to reiterate, it's the small things. Really, really small changes can make a really big difference. So let's talk about these habits. And remember, I want you to pick 1 or maybe 2 of these. We have a recording of this session. I'm going to make the slides available to you. I'm going to share the resources. There's no need to try it all today. Pick 1 or 2 and see what difference it makes. So there's categories of these habits, just to keep it really nice and simple. We've got the things that involve our thinking. We've got the things that involve our bodies. We've got the things that involve relationships, and we've got the things that involve our emotions. And I make the distinction between the psychological and the emotional, and you'll see why that's a useful distinction to make when we go through them. So you might think, actually, there's something in the social I've been neglecting. I really want to do something in that space. Brilliant. There's nothing in this list is going to be better than anything else. So let's think about the noticing what's going on inside of my thinking. Or from the perspective I take when working with clients, it would be, what stuff is my mind giving me? Because if you visualize someone giving you something, you can take it, but you don't have to do anything with it. We take most of our thoughts as fact, and we feel we need to do something with them, but we don't. We can merely notice, am I here? Am I in the past? Am I in the future? And if I'm in the past or the future, just gently bring your attention back to the here and now. Because if you're dealing with a problem, it's likely that it might be a regret-filled past or an anxiety-filled future. It's unlikely to be a planful future. So just notice that and try and bring yourself back to the here and now. Also notice the tone and the content of the thoughts. Core to this is practicing a really nice little mantra: pause, notice, choose. Pause, notice, choose means you stop. You pause everything you're doing. Just notice the thoughts and the emotions, label them, and then choose how you want to behave next. And that helps short circuit the automatic responses, the cathartic emotions coming out. You always have a choice. It just doesn't seem like we do. So if the tone and the content of your thoughts is very self-critical, it's not particularly helpful if you're trying to, find a solution to a problem. But you don't need to do anything with that self-criticism. You can just watch it float away. We don't need to engage with it. So the analogy I use all the time for this approach to our thoughts is letting go. If you were in a tug of war with your mind, well, it takes two of you to pull at the rope. So if you let go, drop the rope, there's no struggle, there's no fight, and you can focus on the here and now. And lastly, with the noticing, pause, notice, choose, notice what it is you think should be happening, must be happening, or what you're trying to control. Because as soon as you take a different perspective on that, you might find I'm trying to control something that's outside of my control, or I'm demanding something of myself and other people that's not realistic. So this is before you lift a finger. This is all up here, and it's all based on uncritical, non-judgmental noticing. Just noticing the stuff your mind gives you. The biological ones actually are neglected a lot. We don't think of them. When you think of psychology, you think of what I've just been talking about, but there's some basics here that we can continue to pay attention to. Sleep is our superpower. Sleep is the bedrock of our well-being and our resilience, and we neglect it at our peril. And we need to make sure we get good quality sleep. Now that's a whole other session. But if we're able to get more sleep, we'll be able to deal better with the challenges that life throws at us. So think about your routines, think about your habits, think about the no-nos of working in bed, think about food and alcohol in the run-up to sleep. Just get yourself a nice, relaxing routine in the run-up to the time you want to go to sleep. And that will help a lot. Keep moving. Keep your body moving. It doesn't have to be boot camp. That's great if you like that. But walking, moving around, not being in a static position all the time. And thinking about what you consume. It can be that one of the ways that we respond to pressure, stress, crisis is that we neglect our food, or we go all in and we think, I deserve this, and we use food as a coping mechanism. So think about what it is you're fueling yourself with, and is that going to affect your mood like sugar will, or like nicotine will, or like caffeine will? And remembering not to neglect that, because that contributes towards your resilience as well. We're social creatures, so it's really important that we acknowledge that side of us. Now that's been made more difficult in the last year. So what's useful is to focus on the need, the social need we have, and to think of different, pragmatic, flexible ways we can meet that need. We can't just wander down to the pub just yet, but we can arrange to have a FaceTime with a friend or share a coffee on screen. So the social support I mentioned earlier is to know who in your network you can reach out to for a chat. Just can I tell you about my life? Can I tell you about today? Can I tell you about this problem? And make sure you've got a few people you can reach out to, but it is circular. as you'll see in a moment. Good karma exists. Seek out positive interpersonal experiences. They can be tiny. They can be tiny. I used to use the example before all of this of making sure that you said hi and how are you to people that you would meet on your way to work, or that you would meet as you went into the building, or that you would see in your neighborhood. Making sure there was a positive interpersonal experience, it can really boost our mood before we get into the, oh, life is terrible at the moment. And those can be chats, small workplace chats that are nothing to do with work. They contribute to team levels of trust. They contribute to productivity, taking a moment here and there, either side of a call, to ask people how they are and talk about something on Netflix. Now, really interestingly, something that boosts our resilience is actually helping other people. We might think, I need all the help, but actually, when we're helping, it helps us. Anyone hazard a guess as to why that might be? How does that work?
It feels good to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you feel good about yourself also. And it feels good to know that you helped somebody else in the world.
Yes. So if you're helping, you're using a skill, you're doing something and you can see the result of it, and you can see what it does for another human being. And the reciprocity bit there as well. You're building relationships and you're demonstrating that we are connected, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it when we're shouting at each other over parking spaces and stuff like that. So it mightn't be the first thing we think of, but it's a great way of building our own resilience, especially when control is an issue. Here's something I can use my skills for. And then we've got our emotional habits, really simple things we can do, like gratitude. It takes 5 minutes at the end of the day. And we've got about 25 years of research supporting this now. So it was treated like a bit of a joke, but take 5 minutes to notice 3 things from the day that you're grateful for. Write it down. That's important, to write it down. And over time, it doesn't balance the books. You know, writing down, I'm grateful for the sunshine, doesn't balance the books with the pandemic, but it does remind you that in any day, there will be something that you can be grateful for. And it doesn't always have to be a positive. It could be, I'm grateful for the feedback I got about my presentation, because now I know how to do a better job. And then when we feel these emotions bubbling up within us, when we have a challenge we're trying to deal with, then we can, instead of legitimizing them and saying, well, what I feel needs to come out, we can say, hold on, if I pause, can I look at this problem? Can I look at this challenge or this person through the lens of curiosity rather than judgment? Because we do that a lot. We judge. We decide. Curiosity is, I wonder why that's happening. I wonder why I'm feeling like this. I wonder what we could do. And compassion just acknowledges, compassion for self acknowledges our humanity and our fallibility. Everyone makes mistakes. No one is perfect. Everyone goes through difficulties. So if we're able to really lean into being curious and compassionate around challenges, we're less likely to act out, use our emotions as a weapon, and we're much more likely to see possible ways out of that challenge because we're being curious. And another very simple thing that you can practice in the morning, in the evening, is to build yourself a ritual, a little activity that you do that you're really happy with, that it gives you a little boost. Now, this is a comforting ritual, not an obsession. So if you can't do it someday, these things happen, but it could be savoring your cup of coffee before you start work. It could be making sure you see your favorite celebrity gossip news website before you do something else. It could be at the end of the day, closing your laptop and going for a walk around the block. The rituals, it doesn't really matter what they are, as long as they're sustainable. But what they tell us is, I'm deciding what I do here. I'm going to do something for me. It might only take a few minutes. The rest of the world is in chaos, but I'm going for my walk, or I'm having my special tea, or you can see, they're just really simple things. No equipment needed, just a nice, simple, comforting ritual. The added bonus when working remotely is that these rituals can signal to us and others around us, I've started work, I've ended work. And they could be a nice top and tail. Keep them simple, keep them enjoyable, and they can be a really nice start and finish to your day. So let me wrap up. I want to share this little tool with you, this thinking tool called habit stacking. If any of those things we've been through sound attractive to you, you might have the vague positive intention, I should do that. That's great. It's highly unlikely that you will follow through if you think I should do that. So what we want to do is create a habit from it. So let's imagine you're going to write down 3 things you're grateful for. You're going to do the gratitude habit. So the first thing we need to do is, what is it I want to do and why? Well, I want to write down in my notebook 3 things I'm grateful for because I think it will help me get a bit of context. Okay, I can take a step back. Next, we need to find something we already do at around the same day. So gratitude, it's good if you do it at the end of the day. So what do I do towards the end of the day? Well, maybe I might say one of the last things I do at work is, well, I shut down my computer. Okay, that's something that happens every day. Then I take the shutting down the computer and I add the gratitude to it. So when I shut down my computer, I write down the 3 things that I'm grateful for, moving from vague aspiration to habit. And you just keep doing it. And the funny / depressing thing about us is when you start doing this, you realize we've got all of these habits that we do every day, all of these great jumping off points that we could use as a trigger for a new habit. And of course, after a few weeks of this new gratitude habit, you could then add another one to the end of that. When I finish my gratitude, I will do 20 press-ups. I don't know. I will do my ritual. But the point is, if we keep them simple and we stack them like that, we can make big changes in our behavior, how we see the world, and of course, contributing to our resilience. So pick 1, pick 2, keep it tiny, use the habit stacking methodology, and then just look for the difference that it makes over the next few weeks. Some resources, some summary. Think of it as a toolkit. You're adding tools to your toolkit. You're not changing who you are. You're just giving yourself more options. Pick the smallest things that can make the biggest difference. Pick one and then track it and then see the difference it makes. It won't make a difference in one day, but in 7, 21, you'll see the difference then. And take the longer term perspective on this. So if you want to find out more, please get in touch with me directly. The podcast was referenced earlier. It's on all the places you can find podcasts. It's called My Pocket Psych, and we talk about these things all the time. We also have an online community called worklifepsych.club, where it's all about personal development and all these kinds of things. That's free. Podcast is free. In particular, with a YouTube channel where I've got some recordings of sessions like this, and I did one specifically about coping strategies, and it's sort of a expanded version of just that point about coping and how we can develop more healthy coping strategies. So if you're interested, it's on the YouTube channel. Just look for Work Life Psych. And your questions at any time. That's everything I wanted to cover. Thank you for listening. What would you like to know about resilience?
There was so much great information. I feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Have another look through this in the coming days. You know, it is the 101, but pick one small thing.
I was thinking about how when my children are grown now, but when they were younger, you had all of these rituals that were good for me as well as for them, and getting myself away from work. You know, the come home, the bathing them, reading them a story, putting them to bed, you know, asking about their day. And that was good for me as well, because it took me totally away from work. I don't have that now. The children are older, you know, I sit here hour after hour, and I need to do more of that, just cutting it off, have that ritual, it's time.
Sounds really good. And you make an excellent point. When we have those commitments, we have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise we'd be neglecting other people. So one of the ways in to make these changes is to create some commitments, make some commitments to yourself and other people. I came across a great one today. One of my coachees, we were talking about this topic for the last couple of months, and the risk is that when we've no social activities, we just keep on working. And she said, I've got a new commitment and I have to finish work on time. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. What is it? She bought a horse. So she has to go and see her horse after work. Now, not everyone can do that. I'm aware, but you could arrange to go for a walk with someone and you don't want to keep them waiting. And we're allowed to do that. So you could go for a walk, you could arrange to watch a show at the same time and talk about it. So anything that says, I need to move from this is going to be good for us. And also, as you know from raising kids, routine benefits everybody. Yeah. We might think we don't need it, but we do, even when we're adults. And routine helps our sleep in a big, big way, an underrated way.
That sleep one really resonated with me as well. That's the one thing I tend to let go. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this extra stuff, and then
sleep suffers as a result. A lot of people have had their sleep disrupted in the last year. There's been a kind of a pandemic of insomnia as well, which makes absolute sense if you think about it. Everyone's got a lot on their minds, a lot of worries, a lot of bad news. So staying away from that as much as we can and getting into the same kind of routine we would with kids. It's this time, it's time for a bath, it's time to read, it's time to get into bed. It works. It really, really works.
For me, the challenge is the things I know I should or need to be doing versus the things I want to be doing. Mm-hmm. So, I work a lot. Right, but I make it a point to 5:30 p.m. at the latest. I close my computer unless there's an emergency, and I go and spend time with my daughter because by 7 she's in bed. And then there's things I have to do in the house, clean, organize, whatever it is. And finally, by the time I get to sit down, it's like 8 or 9. And I want to take a couple of hours and sometimes a little longer to just kind of be with my thoughts and be with myself. My wife goes to sleep before me, and then I literally from like 10 to midnight, I have a couple hours that are just mine, that I can do whatever I want with, watch TV or play piano or whatever. But I know I should be going to sleep. So it's like this, I shouldn't wait longer to go to sleep, but I also want this time. And it's almost always this fight between the mental side of having some time to myself, between the healthy side or the biological side of needing a little bit more sleep always.
Yeah.
So that's been the challenge for me over this last year, especially, but even before that.
I think it's a 21st century challenge because we could, life is 24/7. So our job is to decide when our day ends. It's, we can keep going, except we can't. And there's more content out there than we could ever consume. So if we feel, I'll just stay up for a little bit more. Oh, there's another box set, or there's another website I can read, or there's another message. Oh, I need to respond to this tweet. It's an outrage. And before you know it, you're eating away at time you could have been sleeping. All I would say to that is what I would say to any of my clients, which is, if you wake up in the morning and you could immediately go back to sleep, you're probably not getting enough sleep. And so then you think, maybe if I could bring it back by 15 minutes and just get to bed 15 minutes earlier, see what difference that makes. And keep on that trajectory until you find, okay, I've got a nice balance between I wake up and I'm not a zombie and I feel I've got a bit of freedom the night before. But there's no recipe, I'm afraid. Sorry. I don't have a checklist.
I wasn't expecting you to be able to tell me, well, if you just do this, you get 2 more hours in a day.
I know. Could you imagine? No, I'd probably still have a full head of hair if that was the case. No, and it is a challenge for all of us. So I think, if you think about values and you think about intent, all it means is the next thing I'm about to do in line with the kind of person I want to be? And then you think, well, I do have a choice now. I could press play or I could go to bed. What kind of person do I want to be? And that normally reminds us, oh, okay, maybe it's time to not do that or do more of this.
That's a good point.
Richard, I wanted to share a story of the psychological element of being in the present. Mm-hmm. Recently, I've been volunteering at vaccination centres, and you often get people who are coming in worried, I hate needles, I'm really scared. And okay, yeah, it's fine, but right now, where are you? And I was trying to bring them back to the present. And right now you are standing on a staircase. So let's remember that you're on a staircase and there are no needles around you right now. And like, oh yeah, okay, fine. So, we walk a couple of steps. Where are you now? I'm still on the staircase. Okay. Any needles? No needles. Okay. What are you worried about? Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. And it's always trying to drag them back into that present. Even if it's that present, it's just for 5 minutes, trying to keep them calm and not worry about things before they move on to the next stage. And then even talking about the needle, the needle is like this thin and you're not going to feel it and it's going to be okay. And, don't worry about it. And if any of your worries, all your worries are at the moment, something you don't know about. And at the moment you're standing on a staircase and you just keep moving a step forward and a step forward. And it's trying to bring them to that present moment and to bring their to bring calmness back to them as well. I think that
sounds excellent.
It's been fun.
No, it sounds amazing, and you hit the nail on the head. Most of our upset is about stuff that hasn't happened yet and may never happen.
Yeah, exactly. They're all worried about something that they cannot control for a start, or they can control it. They don't have to go and do it, but they work themselves up into this sort of anxiety of something that is far bigger than it's going to be. And so it's like bring them back into that presence of just going, right now you're here. And all you're doing is standing and you're talking to me. Well, that can be scary. But it's just different things. You're not with a needle in front of you. So why are you scared of needles?
And of course, when we do that, it could be needles or spiders or heights, whatever. Our body gets anxious, and the signs of anxiety from our body cause our mind to go, something must be wrong because I don't feel right. So everything we can do to just slow down in the moment sends a signal back to our body, to our minds, okay, it's not that bad. So talking people down, as you've been doing, it's a great way of doing it. Great. Thank you for sharing it.
No, you're welcome. But we have it with meetings as well, oh God, I've got this meeting tomorrow and it's going to be hell or whatever. And, you go through that psychological thing of, oh, what if? But you're not there in the meeting. And then the meeting happens, you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. I lost a whole night's sleep over this thing. And it wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
I
came across a really good piece of research just a few weeks ago demonstrating that people who make a list of tasks before they get into bed will on average fall asleep 15 minutes faster and have better quality sleep than people who don't, or people who write a list of things they have finished. Okay, so it's to take the worries off the mental deck and say, I'm making
unloading, isn't it? It's just,
it is, and it works really, really well. So when we feel a bit overwhelmed, write a list. It's not just, it's not just a distraction technique. It's taking some stuff off our mind, and it works really well. Any other questions or comments?
It could be hundreds of Post-it notes on your... There's my list.
I'm a fan of Post-it notes. They're physical. And you can fit things on them like pause, notice, choose. That's why they work really well. And you can have it in front of you all the time.
Hi, Richard. This is Shami.
Hi, Shami.
Hi. This is my first time with this group. And I think this has been a really good session. I just wanted to ask you on the morning ritual thing. I've been trying to do it for the last 1 month. I try and wake up roughly around the time the sun comes up. And I try and make it a point to just watch sunrise, have a cup of coffee, and then start studying. But then most of the times I almost always miss it. And that kind of starts building this guilt, which just keeps accumulating over the days. And so that becomes more of a negative reinforcement than a positive one that I intended to be. So I know you did mention that we shouldn't be obsessing over the morning ritual, but if that does happen, which I think it does for most people, what's the best way to cope with that?
You've just described like a really common example of what people say, my morning ritual, because it's very lovely, but it's very difficult also. So one of the things is to create a ritual that is super easy to do. So if you're finding it hard to wake up in the morning to see the sunrise, then you can either start bringing back your alarm from the time you wake up to something that's going to get you up before sunrise, or you could adjust your ritual and say, you know what, my ritual to begin with is just having a quiet cup of coffee in the morning, regardless of whether the sun is up or not. Once that's in place, you can start adding things to it. But it may be because of your own chronotype, your biological sleeping clock, that's going to be really difficult for you. I mean, I know I could never do it, just the way I'm built. I'm not a morning person. But with habits, one of the risks is that we think, I've done it, I've not done it, oh, that's it. So we want to look at habits as more often than not, I do this thing, rather than it must be done. Because if you remember, why am I doing it? I'm doing it for me. And if I don't do it one day, okay, I can do it tomorrow. If I don't do it for 2 days, I'll do it the next day. So rather than giving up, look at what you can adjust to make it easier to do the thing you want to do. Secondly, why are you doing that one? Think about the underlying motivation for seeing the sunrise and having a quiet cup of coffee. Is there another way you could meet that need that wouldn't involve the strenuous getting up early? Right. That's maybe one to reflect on.
Okay. All right.
I hope that answered your question in some way.
Yeah. Yes, it did. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Whatever the habit you try and cultivate from this, everyone, track it, put a little tick in your calendar or a little circle on a piece of paper. But when there's a blank or there's no X in the box, just remember, oh yeah, life happened that day, and I'll pick it up again the next day. Don't give up, because you're doing it for you.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I always think the labeling your thoughts is a really interesting thing. Somebody talked to me about it a few years ago, and I thought, gosh, that's actually never going to work. Like, what's the point of something coming in and you being like, oh yeah, this is blah blah blah, and then just letting it go? Mm-hmm. But actually, I'm sharing it because it's made quite a big impact into my life. Of, like you say, whether it's that meeting or whatever it might be, me being like, oh yeah, that's me being anxious about this particular thing or whatever it is, labeling it and then letting it go. And after, probably took 3 or 4 months for it to actually impact me, but it's really powerful. And it was really interesting that you brought that up, because I thought, this pause, notice, choose, label is just, it's really worth trying. So I'd encourage anybody who has, maybe more anxiety or anything really, just to label it and let it go, because it really works. And I was very skeptical of it, but it made a big.
That's brilliant.
So thanks. But yeah, thank you.
No, it works because it forces us to take a step back from our thoughts. If it's a bit like, I've had to do this a lot more recently, when you have to sort of go like this to see something up close. If we go back from something, we can take it all in. So if you remember the thinking engine analogy, if you're right up against the thinking engine, everything it produces, you've got to sort of gather up and go, oh God, I better do something with this. You take a few steps back and look at the thinking engine and look at what it's producing. You can go, that's a worry, that's a prediction, that's embarrassing, that's a handy reminder, that's blah, blah. But the whole time you're just getting back from them rather than having them here. They're over here. You still have the thoughts. So we never want to try and get rid of thoughts. Then we're back in the struggle if we try and change them or get rid of them. But if we see them and just go, that's a prediction. Don't need to do anything with that now. And there's another thought, and there's another thought, and there's another one. It's the one good thing about our minds. It's constantly giving us new stuff to look at. So visualizing it, labeling it is good, and visualizing it on a conveyor belt, just moving on, going around the corner. We don't have to do anything with it. But thanks for that, Helen.
I like that. It's
nice to hear.
It's mindfulness, isn't it? I was having this conversation. It was probably similar to yours, Helen, with woman who yoga instructor that I know, and I was telling her that I think it was it was one of your meetings, Helen and Ines, about happiness, and I'd been late for it, but I went and I watched it, and for some reason it was just the right time for me. And when I finished watching it, I said to myself, that's it, I'm going to be happy. And I went downstairs and I told my husband, I'm going to be happy. And he was like, thank God for that. You know, you're going to be happy now. And I have been much happier since, but, you know, and I was saying to her, well, I know, you know, there was one night last week and I was really cranky or agitated. That was the word. And I told my husband, I'm just agitated. I'm just telling you now, you know. And she gave me 4 steps, but now I forget them. But it was like, recognize it, and then it was like another level and another level. And I think it's probably along that same lines of, you know, label it and then choose what to do with it. Because I guess if you're mindful of it.
The noticing, you know, if we don't want to get hijacked by our emotions, we have to notice what's going on inside, see them coming like a train coming into the station. We don't automatically jump on every train that comes into the station. We look at the destination, and so we can see it come in and go, well, that's anger. I'm not getting on that train. And I can watch it leave the station and I can choose what I want to do. But if we keep jumping on them, then we become that thing. And then we regret it. Sometimes, sorry, I'm speaking for everyone, but you know, when you calm down after the emotion, you think, I could have handled that better. And that's a good sign that it was a hijack.
I think the fact that sometimes we put ourselves not really breathing, which is such a natural thing to do, and we are holding on, and then obviously that builds up in the interactions that we have. So I wonder how something so natural, something so intrinsic, we still don't do to ourselves. How can we help our teams to be more cautious, become more resilient, grow some of those things? Because sometimes it's easier to see when that is building up into someone else than to yourself. So is there any techniques or anything that you could point us at that we could help our teams with?
So I would say that we often deprive ourselves of what's good for us. We're the only mammals that deprive ourselves of sleep. All other mammals get tired and they go to sleep, and we just stay awake and keep going. So one of the best things if you want to see more resilience in your team is to role model resilient type behaviors so that other people can see, well, that's a good response. Well, that's a good way of dealing with that. And signpost it, explain what you're doing. Because if you can talk about how you feel and what you're going to do as being two different things, this is quite frustrating, and I think we need to be calm. This is quite upsetting, and we need to be diplomatic. And you can demonstrate we always have a choice. We always have a choice. And if that's spoken about openly and you reinforce good responses in your team, then people will see, okay, this is a good way of handling these difficult situations. But sometimes it can just be about breathe. Take 10 breaths before you decide, because it helps reduce all of that pressure, all of that stress, calms us down physiologically. And if we're focused on our breathing, that takes attention. And so it can distract us from what we might say and we might later regret. But role modeling it is the way to go. So that's for everyone here to start doing this stuff, and the people around you will follow. I don't know if I'm at the end of my slot, guys, so.
I forgot about the timing. Sorry, I was just really enjoying the discussion. Sorry.
I don't want to impinge on anything else you have planned.
No, that's pretty much us. We don't have anything further. So if you guys have any other sort of burning questions, if you're, you know, like Richard said earlier, if you're a bit nervous, we'll just reach out to him directly. But yeah, any last questions, I suppose, thoughts?
I was going to mention something earlier. I think, Helen, when you were asking about, you know, if people are telling you a problem and you want to tell them the solution. And I heard a quote recently, and I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but it was that we often listen to answer rather than listen to listen. And that really resonated with me, because I I know often, especially in a social situation, but once you hear part of what somebody's saying, you're ready to give an example when that happened to you or how you dealt with it, or, you know, and then you almost like hijack, as I do here, I talk too much, but you almost hijack the conversation, or your mind is hijacking the conversation and you're not listening. And I was discussing it with my husband, and we both agreed that we have like one friend who we think is a really good listener, and he just listens before he will say anything. So I occasionally try to remember to do it, but it's not easy. But we do often listen to respond rather than listen to just listen.
And listening to understand, you know, to like, can I see their point of view rather than waiting for a gap so I can tell you about me and my perspective on this, because that's what we do. And it takes intent and effort to step out of social mode into being comfortable with pauses and silence. It's really uncomfortable at first, but if you just let things hang, you're demonstrating, I'm thinking before I'm responding. I will, if people are interested, plug an event for next week. Sorry, guys, I'm plugging away. The Work Life Cycle Club is our online community, and we have a virtual meetup every month. And next Wednesday, lunchtime, our meetup, I've got a mindfulness expert joining us. She's a PhD researcher on the science of mindfulness, and she's going to be talking about demystifying it, bunking a few myths, and also talking about some simple mindfulness techniques. So if you join, it's all free. If you go to worklifecycle.club, sorry, it's a club.club, you can sign up there, and it's in the events tab. And we have one of those each month, but she's coming in to talk to us about that. And if you join, our community influences what we talk about each month, and we try and get experts in. So last month, it was all about intentional use of technology. So we try and keep it practical and give people takeaways, like today, hopefully.
Thank you very much, Richard. I put some of the links earlier on, so you guys should be easy to find the club. One more thing, if you don't mind, before we leave, please open this link, tell us what you thought, help us to become better at those events. Is really, you know, we are co-creating this together. So please just take 1 minute, these 3 simple questions. That will be much appreciated. And with that, I would like to thank you all for your time. There is a lot for me to digest and to stack in my current habits so they stick, and so that I can become better at what we do every day. So thank you very much, Richard, for being with us. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me. It was great to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.